My grandfather, the Polish one, had a bad case of wanderlust, and he saw just about every state in the Union till he finally settled down with a family. My mother, though, remembers him sometimes staring silently out the window and her mother saying, "Just leave him be. He's hearing the train whistles again." Well, we have a couple of stories tonight about hearing the train whistles, about that desire to see what's down the track, around the bend, or over the next hill. We'll meet a man who is truly one of the few people I know who can be called an adventurer. He's a writer, and we traveled, well, by his standards, just a little ways to track him down. Forget that cross-state rivalry between St. Louis and Kansas City. Missouri's most famous city around the world is almost certainly Hannibal, thanks, of course, to Mark Twain. Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn are literary characters who've been read in all kinds of languages all over the world, and for foreigners who make it this far into the middle of our country, seeing the great Mississippi River is what seeing the Danube or the Nile would be for us. Well, we came to Hannibal not because of Mark Twain, but because of another Missourian who knows the Mississippi River and has written about it. Eddy Harris wrote Mississippi Solo, the story of his canoe trip the length of the river. It came out like 15 years ago, but something's happened recently that has a lot of people reading this book and meeting the author, and that's why we're in Hannibal.
This was my moment, and this was my river, and truth be known, this was my life and my joy, the wildest and greatest and most exciting thing I've ever done. I'm at St. Louis in this point. I've come down from Minnesota to St. Louis, and this is a place where I am thinking about quitting because I am exhausted.
Mississippi Solo has been chosen as this year's selection by Readmore, a sort of statewide book club. So Eddy Harris, who now lives in Paris, has been visiting Missouri libraries, reading from the book, and talking about his 1985 adventure.
He didn't look at me when he talked, and his voice was vague with longing.
Sometimes people, I think, don't like to go back and look at the first thing they published, and they'd rather talk about what they did later or what they're doing next. You don't seem to mind talking about that first book.
No, I don't mind talking about it. I don't want to read it, but I'm happy to talk about it. I think it's a wonderful book. I think for the period where I was at that period, I think it's a really great book. And I love it, and it was my mother's favorite book, and there was nothing wrong with that book. I don't want to go back and look at the previous things, the things that didn't get published, but this one is, I think, quite a creation. And I could write a fiction piece about a guy, even a first-person guy, riding down the river and tell a great story. But it wouldn't be this one because the emotion...
You talked about it a little bit yesterday, but it was and still is a significant event, breakthrough, publication for you.
Yep.
And in that sense, you're pretty fond of it, I suppose.
In that sense, I am extremely fond of it. Continues to lead to the future. It's the book that got the career started, the career as a published writer.
He wasn't the first or the last to canoe the length of the Mississippi River. A few years ago, while shooting a story at the Locks and Dam at Clarksville, Missouri, we happened upon these two from Memphis doing the same trip. And yes, as they and Harris found out, the Army Corps of Engineers will operate the locks for anybody, even a guy in a canoe. It is a physically demanding trip, and there are real dangers. Barges can run you down, towboat wakes can flip you over, and nobody'd ever know. But Harris was also a black man doing this trip alone, and that too became part of the story. Since writing Mississippi Solo, Eddy Harris has written of more adventures and personal journeys. South of Haunted Dreams chronicled a motorcycle trip through the Deep South. He wrote of living in Harlem and traveling alone the length of Africa. But how much is putting yourself in a little bit of danger a key to...
There is a lot of that in what I do. And not only for the sake of danger, as if I have a death wish, which some people have accused me of having, but because other people are living dangerous situations. Not so much canoeing down the Mississippi River, but people live in precarious positions in Africa. People live in Harlem, which may or may not be so dangerous, but it is at that situation. And that's what I do. What I would like to do with my life is to put myself in other people's shoes, live that life for a while, and then be able to tell that story to those of us who can't get there and who maybe don't even know that those lives are that way, so that I can share the rest of the world with them in some small fashion at least. Yeah, no, I didn't know how dangerous any of this was going to be. I was the dumbest cluck you ever saw. Otherwise, I never would have done it in the first place. I knew there was some danger, but I didn't know just how. I grew up in St. Louis, and the river there...
Harris began growing up on the north side. Then his family moved to Kirkwood. In his teens, he went to Priory, the private, mostly white school, where he found acceptance and opportunity. His life was shaped by the urban and suburban, the black and the white.
Probably part of the shtick in my books is an optimistic one because of that experience, that combined experience.
What you don't have, at least you don't begin with a sense of anger or confrontation. And now maybe that's a white man's perspective.
Well, no, it's true. But in South of Haunted Dreams, there is that sense of anger and sort of confrontation, or at least looking for anger and confrontation, even if it's manufactured. Because I don't have it. It's not my own. And when I manufacture it, it's not organic to me. It's anger and aggression and a chip on my shoulder that I have adopted because of the stories that I've heard, but not because of the life that I have lived.
Do people expect that anger? I mean, and I'm wondering if publishers would or agents would say, "Could you give me a little more of that angry black man thing? Because I think I can sell that."
I would have a much better time as a commercial writer if I were much more. What tends to happen in my case, I think, sadly, is that I'm not giving people what they're expecting, and because of that, I'm losing out. People want to read what they already know. People want to discover what they already have discovered in the past. They want the cliche images. So it seems to me anyway. And because I'm trying to take them a different way and let them think a different way, in fact, let them think for themselves, I lose readers because it's, first of all, hard to categorize the stuff. Secondly, it just doesn't reinforce what is already there. And so a reader turns away from this and he goes to a book like Makes Me Want to Holler, which tells you basically what you already are envisioning.
Eddy Harris's next adventure, he may try to travel as an illegal immigrant from Africa to Europe. He is now a citizen of the world, a St. Louisan who lives in Paris, France, loves the life, and has no plans to move back.
I'm having too good a time, and I have embraced France as if it were my home.
So Josephine Baker comes to mind because she's from St. Louis and she ends up in France, but she escapes St. Louis. I mean, you wouldn't put yourself in that. You're escaping the racism of St. Louis.
No, in fact, I come back to St. Louis often, and at the end of the Harlem book, there's a quote about living life in basically one foot in two worlds, and that's what I think I'm doing. I manage to be an outsider everywhere now, but I still have a sense of permanence in both places, or in many places. One of the hazards of telling your deeds, recounting this kind of adventure, is that the marvels of them cannot be hidden. They rise to the surface like bubbles and burst with tiny explosions of excitement. Envy sidles up and shows itself, without the masks this time, and suddenly everyone you talk to wishes he could be doing what you've been doing.